Good evening, everybody. Hi, my name is Josephine Ong. I'm a representative, Filipinos for Guåhan's representative to the Fanohge Coalition. We're here today to do our virtual forum entitled Reproductive Rights and Indigenous Body Sovereignty. Before we begin, I just want to give a quick briefer about the Fanohge Coalition. So the Fanohge Coalition is a collective of groups and individuals united in their support for the rights of the Chamorro people to exercise self-determination and the protection of their unique connection to the island of Guåhan. As a coalition dedicated to Guåhan's decolonization and indigenous sovereignty, the coalition recognizes the connections between abortion rights, body autonomy, and Chamorro's right to self-determination. In response to public debates about the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade and the Guam legislature's Heartbeat Bill Act, members of the Fanohge Coalition, representing groups that we'll be introducing right after this introduction, have organized the following forum to discuss the potential intersections of the fight for indigenous sovereignty over indigenous folks' bodies and our islands, most especially those we call home. Okay, so without further ado, we'll start with the questions. Lasia.
Half a day, everyone. My name is Lasia Casil. My pronouns are she and her, and I will be your moderator for this evening. We have a list of questions, and we'd like to take the first question. We'll give you 3 minutes to introduce yourself, and when your time is up, you'll hear this sound. Can you hear it? We won't cut you off, but we will ask you to kind of wrap it up so that we can make sure that we get to everyone. Everyone is able to answer the question, and we'll have time at the end of this for questions from our viewers. So let me just set the timer here. Now, to begin this conversation, could you please introduce yourself and the organization that you represent, and how your organization or you personally connect with this particular issue that we're going to be talking about. And we'll just start with Monaeka Flores.
Monaeka, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Monaeka Flores. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a core member of Independent Guåhan, who was fabulous to lend their logo to the rally against Bill 291, and also supporting the work to protect reproductive rights here in Guåhan, and seeing all the connections for linking our struggle for sovereignty as well with body sovereignty and also with land sovereignty. And I'm here today also as an individual, as a queer person who sees this as an issue that impacts the LGBT community in a lot of ways. When I testified against Bill 291 at the legislature, I said that right now all of us are bearing witness to many wars, including a war being waged on our human rights and here at home and in the United States, a war on our access to healthcare, a war on our capacities to rise from cycles of poverty and violence, a war on women, a war on LGBTQ and gender nonconforming people, a war on indigenous communities and people of color, a war on the poor, a war on our dignity. And so I am really excited to be here today with the other members who are able to join, and I'd like to pass it on to the next person, Sinamasi. Thanks so much for having me.
Great, thank you. Next on our panel is Ms. Joni Kerr.
Half a day. I'm Joni Kerr, and I am representing the GCC Ecowarriors, or Community Ecowarriors, who are also a member of the Fanohge Coalition. I am also a member of Guam People for Choice, and I'm also here as a private citizen because I feel so strongly about the anti-abortion legislation that our island faces. So I'm also hoping to bring up how, because of the Ecowarrior connection, I'd like to bring up how sustainability is connected to reproductive rights, and I hope that will also lend a different kind of perspective to the conversation. Thank you.
Great. And to our next guest, Miss Carla Torres Haddock.
Howdy, my name is Carla Haddock, and I am a member of Guam People for Choice, but I'm not here necessarily on their behalf. I'm here as a different perspective, being personally pro-life, a mother of 7 wonderful children, and a medical provider. I am a nurse practitioner who specializes in family, acute, and emergency care, and seeing these issues and working with mothers and other people firsthand. I think I have a unique perspective on the issues that Guam is facing, along with a lot of the social issues. So that is really why I'm here and wanting to speak to others and kind of bring that unique perspective, navigating as a personally pro-life, but advocating for the pro-choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. And next we have Miss Moñeka. I believe you're joining us from Saipan.
I'm on Guam right now, but
you're on. Welcome home.
I go back and forth. Yeah, I'll be back in Saipan tomorrow. Happy day, everybody, in this wonderful panel. I'm excited to be here representing a local nonprofit called Micronesia Climate Change Alliance. I have the honor of co-leading that organization. It's one of the few organizations on the island dedicated to tackling the daunting global challenge of the climate crisis. And out here in the Pacific Islands, we're experiencing those devastating impacts pretty immediately and intensely. And so much of climate justice is really tied to reproductive justice and gender justice. The adverse effects of climate change aren't felt equitably among all peoples, and women and girls and children are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. And the UN IPCC report in 2021 found that gender inequalities are intensified by climate-related impacts. And as a result, there's higher rates of poverty, domestic violence, and psychological and emotional stress on women. And so women all over the world are on the front lines and are boldly leading climate justice, and reproductive rights are integral to climate justice. I'm also have many sisters. I have 4 sisters. I've come from a family of all girls. So this is a really personal issue for me and all other women. And I definitely don't want to see any legislation that impedes on our rights to make decisions for ourselves and make hard decisions for ourselves in the way that it'll affect our futures. So this is really important because of the climate crisis and because women being at the forefront of this environmental catastrophe, and as well as the reproductive and as well as these policies that take away our ability to respond to both climate crisis and the needs of our future and our bodies.
Thank you, Monaeka. And also joining us today is Ms. Taylor Paige. Same question. Can you please introduce yourself with the organization you represent, and how these issues connect with you or your organization or personally?
Today, my name is Taylor Paige again, and today I am here on behalf of just all the women in general, and to help become the voice of the voiceless. And what I mean by that is being able to fight for the rights of the individuals who have not walked the face of our beautiful land yet, and who are just basically not here and not in existence yet. And I would just also like to talk about, I'm also here to discuss because growing up with mainly majority girls, we always had to be aware of our surroundings. And it's very important if the government is potentially threatening to take our rights, and if a case happened, any one of us got raped in the case and we cannot abort the baby, that would play, again, mental effects on our health, because we're going to proceed with having a baby we didn't want, and through cause of especially trauma, and that baby it will just cause a ripple effect, because they're going to go into the system, and the government is not going to I would say supply more for the child, because if they can't do it now, how are they going to do it when this issue is at hand? And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. We also have joining us today, Ms. Debby Allen. Did you want to also speak?
I can chip in as needed or as it works out.
Would you like to just at least introduce yourself?
Yes, yeah, sure. So my name is Debbie Allen, and I'm representing Talaya Micronesia, a nonprofit here on Guam. And I'm also an Earth Charter educator. And this is tied to sustainable development goals and education for sustainable development through the United Nations and the University for Peace. I'm also here as a mother and as an advocate for women's rights, and not just women's rights, but people's rights in general.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we will continue with the questions, and moving on, we'll give you 2 minutes to respond to the question. And again, you'll hear the bell, and you don't have to quit immediately, but if you could just kind of wrap it up. The first question, and we'll start with Ms. Joni Kerr. While organizing this event, the coalition discussed the importance of framing abortion, not just as an issue impacting women, but LGBTQ, trans, non-binary folks as well. Could you please explain why the coalition framed abortion rights in this way?
Sure, I could try. So this also hits me on a personal level, because I am the mother of a non-binary kid, and we have to face the reality that when people identify in a different way from the gender that they were born to or viewed as, if they identify differently, then that's their right, their fundamental right. And so we also have to understand that that other people can get pregnant, and so if we think about the ramifications of just anybody getting pregnant, whether they identify as a woman, as or not, then the fundamental right that they have to take care of their body, that they have over their body, you just can't take that away. And no government, no law should take that fundamental right away. But it's important to recognize this group of people because they're not going away. They've been here. And it's not a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody unless they've not been paying attention. But people have identified as different genders ever since people started populating the earth. And so I think that because we're recognizing this, we're starting to recognize this, that it follows that we have to also calibrate our ideas of what it means to include them, and how that's actually even more enriching to our community. So I'm also really fervent about the idea that if people aren't accepting of other people and the gender that they choose, that it comes from fear, and the fear, they have to recognize that fear and understand that it is an unfounded fear. And so I'm hoping to raise that awareness as well. There's nothing to fear. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joni. And the same question, Ms. Carla Haddock.
I guess, wouldn't it be wonderful if this issue really only affected birth parents, but the truth of the matter is it absolutely does not just affect the birth parent, right? So say that we allow for a woman to go through, or a birth parent to go through and have this child, and that birth parent can no longer care for it. Then it becomes the responsibility of the entire society to care for that child. And further, when you're talking about abortion, abortion is a medical procedure. If we allow the government or whatever, or whomever, to start to dictate medical procedures and what we do, that has tremendous effects on the rest of the populations, the LGBTQ queer plus community. Because then who's to say that the government can't start to regulate hormonal procedures, right? The medicine that we give to induce abortions is hormonal. It's the same things. So where do we draw that fine line? And it becomes this gray area. So to say that it's only going to affect a person who can bear a child is absolutely ignorant. So paying attention to this very important matter really has a ripple effect for everyone in the community.
Thank you so much, Carla. And Ms. Moñeka?
Thank you so much. I really love what the
Oh.
first two panelists said. Oh, sorry.
No,
You're-
that's
you're-
okay.
Monaeka.
I'll call,
Okay.
how about I'll call you next, and then I'll call Moñeka. Sorry.
Great. Okay, no problem. Sorry. That happens to us often. So I guess every panel, every conference, everything. Yeah, that's what we get for having the same name. Anyhow, I really do appreciate both of the previous speakers. First of all, I identify, as queer, and also I really have been thinking about, how gender has my gender expression has changed throughout my life, and I also really appreciate that Carla was saying it's a medical procedure. Abortion is healthcare, and the issues are so connected, right? And we saw when the memo from the Supreme Court was leaked for the reversal of Roe v. Wade, we saw also leaked messages with the intention to dismantle, marriage equality laws and laws protecting LGBTQ rights. So these things are so connected. And the binary is a colonial construct in a lot of ways. As Joni mentioned, queer, trans, gender nonconforming people we're not a new phenomenon, right? And colonization has actually really impacted our knowledge and our connection to our queer ancestors. And there's a lot of great radical work to try to confront that. But I really was appreciative that Fanohge Coalition, had taken this approach to broaden the language to, just to really think that it's so nuanced, it's so complicated and diverse, and people who can get pregnant. This affects people who can get pregnant however they identify, right? And so I think, in terms of the binary and even understanding the binary, that there's only man and only woman, and the truth is gender is the whole spectrum between these two extremes, and the binary is so limiting. We're not taking anything away from women by including gender nonconforming people, by including trans people, because this is an issue that impacts all of us. We're not taking anything away from the work that women have done, the struggle that women have done. It's not about erasure of that. It's really actually about erasure of people of all kinds, right? Trans and gender nonconforming folks, people of color, people, people who living in poverty, all of this erasure that happens all the time to our marginalized communities. So that's my time. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, Moñeka.
No, thank you so much. I really want to thank Nate and Auntie Joni and Carla for their responses and really expanding what my idea of this issue by pushing the framework to be more inclusive and the way that we frame this to be more inclusive, because, just leaving other people at the outside that are outside of the binary, out of the way that we frame the issue, that this isn't just a women's rights issue, is violent and is erasure of that whole experience. And there's already a phobia around queer and trans people that we need to have serious conversations about, especially in any space that's trying to talk about equality and rights. These identities need to, I hope that our medical community in all cases can be gender affirming and have language in the pro-choice movement and all of our movements that calls for the inclusive framing of the issue, including abortion care.
All right, thank you. And Taylor, would you like me to repeat the question or?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, so while organizing this event, the coalition discussed the importance of framing abortion not just as an issue impacting women, but LGBTQ, trans, non-binary folks as well. Could you please explain why the coalition framed abortion rights in this way?
Okay. So everybody else who has went before me on this panel pretty much covered gist of what I would have to say, but also speaking of the LGBTQ committee, I would like to talk about when I know personally some, but going back to middle school, that's when they had an idea of who they were without the role, the female, male. And with that, I was going to say it plays an important effect too with how we're just all one. Everybody says we're all one, and that's what we should focus on, because yes, there in the Bible it's God and man, but with creation, he took one of Adam's rib out to put into Eve. So I would think in a sense it is just tying back to how we're all one, and also how oh man, I'm just gonna stop at we are all one, because everybody pretty much had a great perspective on it, and that's all I can really say is we're all one, and we should be focused on how other people feel instead of how we just feel as one. We are a collective, and that is what's matter, hearing people voice their opinions and standing up for what is right versus what is told is right to us. So yes, that is it.
Thank you so much, Taylor. I think that we're doing really good on time here. So Debbie, would you like to also answer the question?
They all answered everything really well. And I would just, reiterate that it's about being more inclusive, and that reproductive rights, it does impact the whole community and people of different perspectives and different gender roles and identities. So it's just something that, and I really like that Carla brought up in terms of the medical aspect of it as well. So I just ditto.
Thank you. All right, on to the next question. How would you define body sovereignty and its potential relationship to abortion? And if we could start with Carla, please.
So what I understand about body sovereignty is control over my own body, right? And that extends to so many different aspects. But when you speak about abortion, it's the control over my body and me having the say about what is inside of me. And, I know that a lot of other people always say, well, what about the fetus? The fetus, doesn't get a say. But in reality, from the medical perspective, that fetus really depends on me and cannot coexist at the detection of a heartbeat until, viability, which is, if we have a really great NICU and a doctor, maybe could be at 28 or so weeks. But, for the vast majority of that time, that baby lives inside of me. And arguably that baby depends on me for the first, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of life, can't even make food for itself, right? And to me, this issue of abortion, I should be able to say what affects my body. And having 7 children, having a child is extremely difficult and tolling and taxing on your body. I have had all of my children premature. All were born 35 weeks or earlier. I almost on my last baby bled out. Why do I not get the say in carrying that, whether or not I want to go forward with my high-risk pregnancy? That to me is where I find a hard time differentiating the two, because every person should absolutely make that decision with the discretion of their healthcare provider. It's a conversation that happens with a trusted individual.
Thank you so much. Oh. Sorry about that. Okay.
Got it, I'm done.
I apologize. Monaeka, same question. How would you define body sovereignty and its potential relationship to abortion?
Yeah, body sovereignty, as Carla put it, is very much about having the final say and control over how, over your body, and having rights over to make decisions for your body. And for us in Micronesia Climate Change Alliance, especially being here on the front lines of the climate crisis, we also want to tie this back to climate justice and the ability to understand that and recognize that the root cause of the climate crisis and of our warming planet is colonization, and this idea of extractive economic and political systems that is proliferated by colonization. It's the same thing that enslaved people and that have oppressed Black, Indigenous people or BIPOC communities across the world. And the idea of control has always been, and controlling others has always been key to colonization. The idea of taking power and extracting from Mother Earth herself and from other people's bodies is very much at the root of many injustices and at the root of the climate crisis. Sorry, I have my babies crying in the background. And so at the core of many climate justice initiative is the just transition. It's a place-based vision-led process, which seeks to restore sacred relationships to the earth and ensure that climate solutions are equitable and just. And reproductive justice is incredibly important to that. It aims to safeguard the rights of the most vulnerable populations, including impoverished children, women, and gender fluid people. And those are the ones who are going to be most affected by any policies like Bill 291 that seek to limit a woman or other person who can become pregnant's ability to make decisions to get medical care, such as an abortion. And in understanding the holistic harm that colonization has caused on humanity, it's really important that we all come to terms that with the idea of sovereignty of different nations and sovereignty of each and every one of us. And that's important. And also sovereignty of the earth, because we all want a safe environment. We all want to be live in a place where we're free to make decisions about our bodies and our lands and our waters, and to create sustainable change in our movements. And so in the long story short, just like bodily sovereignty is so important to climate justice and reproductive justice. They are deeply intertwined, and we can't actualize one without the other.
Thank you, Monaeka. Taylor, is Paige?
Yes. Okay. So going off of what Monaeka said, she actually brought out a lot of good points with colonization, but also go on to the whole, who's to say what we don't? It's a time where we have to wake up and step out of the frame where people are telling us what we can and cannot do, what we can and cannot believe in now, because it is 2022, we are evolving. And honestly, to be honest, how I see it as the future generation, as we, the future generation, the government, they're going to get old, and we're going to come in, the new generation, where it's going to be okay. It's going to be safe to say what you want to, protect what you want to. And also going into, where did I wrote it down. what we should do is, or an example for me as a future mother in the future, you know, everything I would feel if I was to get in the sense, if I was to get raped, and I was forced to keep the baby, that baby will feel the depression, the anxiety, the sadness, because I'm providing for he or she. The being inside of me is a life. So it's going to be passed down from me to them. So I believe it's very important for us to speak and say what we need to and fight this. And also, before they cut off women's rights, they should be implementing safe sex throughout the full years in middle school and high school. Because when I was going to middle school, it was briefly taught in, I would say, 6th grade. It was just like STIs, STDs, that's all they really told us. They didn't teach us how to properly do a condom. They did not teach us what can happen or the harmful effects that will play, and how the government, you know, they'll say, we will help you with this, but actually not so much. You're going to have to do it on your own. And if you were to have a child, for instance, CPS would come and you're not the best financial state. They will say you're a bad parent, even though you're an amazing parent, and take away your child and put them in a system that does not care about them and will only utilize them for the income source. And that is all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Moñeka.
Thank you. You know, just want to, well, Joni, I just want to thank everybody for what they added to the conversation. And, you know, I think of like, just connecting it to the last question, how body autonomy, that the fight for body sovereignty and body autonomy was often led by or fought by members of the LGBTQ, trans and non-binary community. But, you know, I also think, when I think of body sovereignty, yes, I love this connection to land sovereignty, but also we're talking about individual sovereignty, which is what Carla and Monaeka were talking about too. But culturally, the collective should care about and support the individual sovereignty as well, body sovereignty as well. These things are so connected. And, you know, a lot of people think that being Chamorro equals being Catholic. And it's so important that we not to try to muddy those things. Being Chamorro is so much bigger and more beautiful and complex than just being a Catholic. And not, you know, you're not necessarily a bad Chamorro if you're not religious, but there is the need for separation between church and state, and our bodies, people we care about in our lives. But it's even in our history, culturally, that we cared about body sovereignty. We protected people's privacy. And I wanted to read an excerpt from Tina Delisle's book, Placental Politics, which talks about this. She talks about how the Petera, or the nurse midwives, and the Sorohana, the healers, helped women to terminate pregnancies or administer miscarriages for certain needs. And a lot of this, you know, was done with a lot of care and privacy. Sometimes family members would show up to support the person terminating the pregnancy or having a miscarriage. You know, sometimes it was even done in sort of as a, you know, against colonization. If women were impregnated, right, by the Spanish colonizer, for instance, this happened as well. So I want to read an excerpt from Tina's book. There were yet other ways the Petera Sorohana assisted women in having traditional forms of sovereignty over their bodies, through Amut Palai and Lasia, to induce miscarriage with the aid of oral medicines such as tea. The preparation and application of Amut Palai could also help women who experience difficulty achieving sexual orgasm. Privy to the kind of information that was skillfully withheld from the American doctors or the nosy gatekeeping agents of Chamorro Catholic families, Petera were able to work at the comfort level of Chamorro women without sacrificing what was in their mutual best interests, a safe and healthy delivery, or in some instances, good advice and practice for safe sex or safe termination. And another researcher, Anne Pobutsky, wrote about Sorohanas, healers in Guam and in the Marianas, you know, sort of talking about how Sorohanas circumvented colonization, again, to help women have this care, and or pregnant people have this care for each other. This is radical care. This is radical love and respect for somebody's process. And these conversations took place between the pregnant individual and maybe their partner, maybe their families, maybe the care provider. And it's the same thing that needs to happen now. This is not a conversation for the church and the pregnant people, or for the government and the pregnant people. This is really a very private conversation between a woman and her healthcare provider, a person who's pregnant and non-binary trans person who's pregnant with their care provider. And the people who support them. And so those are the things I think about with body autonomy and with this question, body sovereignty rather, and connecting it to these issues. And so I think that's I'll leave it there and pass it on to the next person. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick. Taylor, did you just want to add something briefly?
Yes, I also just want, going off of what I said about middle school, going into high school, it should be known that teens and adolescents, they're not gonna stop having sexual intercourse, no matter what we say, what we do, what the church implements into their brain. So that's why I think it's very important, before they take away our rights, to implement that into schools, how to practice safe sex. What are the pros and the cons of you having sex, why you should wait, and especially if this bill, I'm praying it doesn't pass, but if it does, what is going to happen, especially when you get stuck in that situation as to where you got your girlfriend pregnant, what are you going to do now? They have to really think about the future, and the future is right now and in the future, but that's what I would just want to add to.
Thank you. Joni, if you'd like to add your response to this question.
Sure, those are all wonderful answers, but I want to go back to the fundamental rights of that people have over their bodies. If the UN Women is an organization that is set to make sure that nations follow the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, but fundamental to their message is that women and people who can get pregnant, they should be able to exercise their human rights, because reproductive rights are human rights, and they should be able to make the decision on when to, they should be able to decide when and how many children that they can have. And so that is just so fundamental, because if they're not allowed to do that, and also have access to good health care and so on, women will try to access abortions however in whatever way they can, and this is going to lead to a lot of pain and possibly even death if they're not allowed to do it, because and so this is something that we also want to avoid, because let's face it, wealthy people are going to be able to access abortions. They'll just fly to another state or another country. But people who are in poverty, they're at the fringe, they're the most vulnerable to, and they wouldn't be able to access, the good health care, and abortion is health care. So that question is just goes back to fundamental rights. The other thing that poses a danger to those fundamental rights are fetal rights. And so considering the fetus as a person, and we should take a look at Guam law, because I think there are at least 2 laws that recognize fetal rights. And people may, shoot me down for this, but we have to be practical about assigning rights to a fetus, because this puts a woman in jeopardy as well, or a person who's pregnant in jeopardy as well. So when we talk about body sovereignty, we have to recognize that it's a person, their body. And since they're carrying a fetus, that they have that right to decide when or if they want that fetus. Yeah, so I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Joni. Okay, so on to the next question. Oh, Miss Allen, yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I had so many things. And then I saw some comments also that were shared with us. So of course, yeah, talking in terms of body sovereignty, this is not that it's a pro-abortion, and we keep hearing this. This is not like we are all just about being pro-abortion, right? But the whole idea of sovereignty and that link to control. So, we know that there are situations where, and I'm going to say that growing up a long time ago, but growing up as a young girl in a Christian home, we were taught that men were the dominant ones, and the women were to be subjective. That is part of the Christian, kind of description of the roles of men and women. Of course, they don't discuss all of the other kind of gender identities, right? But the thing is that that's not right. And I think that also was part of the whole colonization thing, that, before the Spanish and the missionaries came here, or they went to all these different places, a lot of indigenous communities had their ways of addressing this. This had been brought up in the conversation already, right? Chamorro women had methods and choices for abortion or for ending a pregnancy. And then the church people came in, the missionaries and all of that came in. This idea, it's a whole different kind of view that the males are superior, they are over the women. And so from that young age, for myself, I know that I grew up with the idea that, the males were to have control, and I was supposed to be submissive, and I was supposed to do whatever, which led to my father sexually abusing me, and my ex-husband being very abusive, because I thought, like my mom said, you made your bed, you sleep in it. That to me came with that idea from the Christian background that I came from. And to me, that it's not right. I don't see how that, why would God do that? I don't know if I even want to go down that route. But in terms of then, somebody saying the woman should, have self-control, and she should, control her desires and this and that. That's just not always the case, from whether it's your father, your uncle, brother, a friend, a date rape. I was also raped in Bali, and I brought that up before at the conversation when talking about this bill, and coming back, and it's like, what do you do if you're pregnant? What am I supposed to do? So I've kind of been through that, and part of the whole reason for that was because it came from this idea that males are dominant over me, and that I'm supposed to be submissive, and under a man. So body sovereignty is something that I didn't grow up with. And it's been a really hard one for me to shift my thinking. So I understand for people that may grow up in a church setting, or may grow up for my generation, the older ones, that, we've been kind of ingrained with this idea that, your husband wants sex, you give sex. Well, what if you get pregnant and you didn't really want to, and you're still nursing, the third child from the marriage, they're all like a year apart. You've got all these little children, but he wants to have sex, and now I get pregnant. You know what I mean? And those things happen. There's a lot of things where women don't really have that control. You guys have brought up, low income. Sometimes that makes a difference. If you don't have access to birth control, then what are you going to do, right? So I think it's this whole thing also then for women in particular of, yes, regaining, somebody said self-love. Yes, but that has to come. That doesn't happen overnight, and we try to bring up a new generation of young women that maybe believe more in that. But I really believe that this idea of women being submissive, of not having that control over their body, that's a long time story that I believe came with a lot of the missionaries and the whole, thing pushing the Bible, and that's how it's supposed to be. The man is here, the woman is down here, and you don't really have that choice in a lot of different ways in life. And I think I probably need to stop there, but yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Deborah, for sharing that information with us. We have 2 questions left, and I know that some of our panelists might have to leave. So if we could just keep it to the time so we can make sure we get everyone in, and then we'll have time for Q&A afterwards. This next question, Monaeka, if we could start with you. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 5 emphasizes gender rights and empowering women and girls. Could you explain how reproductive rights are central to this goal? And how do you think abortion rights affect a person, their family, and their whole community?
Yeah, that's an important goal out of all the 17 SDGs. And that's one that isn't being really grounded in the work that's being done here in Guam. G3 is doing so much, and it's really amazing to see the worker space coming out of the University of Guam at the Chamorro Village, and seeing all these different wonderful things around climate action happening, and life underwater and life on the land. But I haven't seen much come out on SDG number 5, which is to increase awareness on the issues of women and gender, and to really discuss issues around women's rights and non-binary rights. And I think the case of increasing rights for women in America has always been tied to the fight for the pro-life fight. Women across the world have always been practicing abortion. It's not something that was always as stigmatized as it has been in the last century. And abortion was pretty much legal in America until 1869, and within the Catholic Church as well. And it started to become really vilified by religious fundamentalists at the time when some great women suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton and the National Women's Suffrage Association began to emerge and really win rights across America. And in the week of slavery ending, and there was just a big push to smear different women, and this was all executed by racist and misogynist men who described, especially, long-standing midwifery practices, both in the Black and Indigenous communities. There was a lot to I guess the underpinnings of obstetrics in the medical community. What really did come at a smearing of Indigenous practices and labeling them as barbaric. And it's critical to understand those contexts and those histories, because women and Black and Indigenous people are still trying to assert their rights, and white America is still pushing back. And this is a prime example, because we still have to be fighting for so much access to land, protection of our resources, and this the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the anti-abortion movement, or the anti-choice movement, has little to do with protecting lives and saving women or the interest of children. Really, it's about keeping control of wealth and power, and keeping it where it's keeping it where it's unnecessarily being hoarded. And so the anti-choice movement really is about impeding millions of people, millions of poor people from upward mobility, and keeping them in low wage jobs. And it's really important to have that discernment of the history, so that we can ensure, if we really are talking about equity and equality for all, especially economic equality, having rights to make really personal, hard decisions, regardless of your religion, and having access to abortion and other forms of contraception is really, really important to that. And also having expanded healthcare options, and having expanded education, sex ed education. As Taylor was saying, I was also a high school teacher, and there was a high school teacher teaching allied health. And I remember really vividly a student telling me, after we had a long conversation about reproductive health care and caring for your own body, she was saying, I have all these aunties, but nobody really talks. This is the first time she ever talked to an adult woman about sex and about how to take care of yourself in that way. And it was really striking to me that no other teacher, she was maybe like a sophomore in high school, has ever had a real conversation, a genuine conversation that wasn't just about abstinence.
All right, thank you, Monaeka, for sharing that. It looks like we are running out of time. We've got about 10 minutes until the hour is up, and then we'd like to save some time for a Q&A after. So I'm going to have to ask for final thoughts at this time. So if we could start with Taylor, if you could just share your final thoughts and
All right. So I would just like to bring up, because this just popped into my head. I remember having to learn the US, what is it? The US Constitution in middle school, and it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote for the general welfare, and secure the blessings of our liberty," and so forth. And I think that just popped into my head because since we are quote unquote a US territory, but who doesn't really have the rights of basically US citizens, as being indigenous people and colored, we still are deemed below I would say, I forgot who said this, who spoke before me, but the white population going into greed and stuff, it took 100 years, going off of what Monaeka said, women's suffrage movement. It finally passed over 100 years, and now, since that was accomplished, there is bringing to light that they're trying to take more. Once we gain something, they're trying to take something away from us and so forth, meaning taking our voice. And what else are we going to have if we don't have our rights? We're still going to have our voice, but it will just basically mean we'll have to push harder and try harder to preserve and basically, yes, preserve our rights and show more emphasis on how important it is for us to not follow what other people are saying and to be your own person, choose your own path. And it is okay going into LGBTQ to be exactly who you are, because you are exactly who you are and nobody can take that away from you. So that is what I like to end with.
Perfect. Thank you. Neka, would you like to share your final thoughts with us, please?
Sure, but before I do, I just want to thank Debbie Ellen for being, for being vulnerable and sharing her story with us. And thank you so much for your bravery and I'm, and we stand in solidarity with you and survivors of sexual assault and abuse. So thank you so much and for sharing that. I also feel like she brought up this really important point about how, religion has been used to exploit and oppress people. Religion has been used to commit genocide, to steal land, to enslave people. It has been used throughout history to push an agenda of domination and white supremacy. So I think it's so important to connect all of these issues, right? We are connecting economic and environmental sovereignty and land sovereignty to body sovereignty, individual sovereignty, collective sovereignty, but also truly oppression, like this history of oppression that impacts, particular groups of people while empowering, cis het white men. And this is residual of all of that. I do, I feel like, let's see, some of my closing thoughts are that, well, first of all, a few of us mentioned 291, but we didn't really talk about, how 291 is the heartbeat bill. It was introduced by 5 senators in the legislature. And you please look it up. There was a very powerful 3-day public hearing where many folks spoke, but Bill 291 was introduced by Senator Selena Nelson, Senator Amanda Shelton, and it was also co-sponsored by Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Tony Atta, and Frank Blas. And so those are the 5 sponsors of that bill. For those who've been listening, and we haven't really had a chance to talk about that, but so this conversation is directly in response to that, but also in response to, the overreach of the Supreme Court. We're looking, this is really emphasizing our colonial status, where this institution is really reaching directly and messing with our lives, really messing with our lives. And so this is an issue for decolonization and for self-determination as well, because we, as we look at our relationship with the United States and we look at our colonial realities here at home every single day, this is an overreach that is an injustice to us as well. That's part of our colonial reality. And if I could just say real quickly that my body is sacred and my body is sovereign, and nobody can tell me otherwise. And we all wish we lived in a world where our people were protected, we're free from poverty, addiction, homelessness, patriarchal violence, white supremacy, militarization, and war. But that is contrary to our actual colonial reality, which is why we need the right to choose. And, it's connected to our ongoing struggle for sovereignty for our lands and our people. Yeah, and, empire is constantly tightening its grip. It's literally poisoning our lands and our waters, and it's refusing our freedoms. So it's willing to sacrifice public education, food security, climate justice, and genuine security in order to wage wars. And so I really would hope that our leaders instead would look for resources to secure our rights, to secure our access to healthcare, to secure this protection for our people. And I'll leave it there. And thank you so much. Pass it on to the next person for closing thoughts.
Thank you, Moñeka. Joni, Kerr, please share your closing thoughts with us.
Okay, so I'm glad that Moñeka and Nick brought up the issue about power and preserving power, because people may not be aware of this, but the reason why Roe v. Wade was overturned is because of white men wanting to stay in power. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century and just before the end of the 19th century, when not white supremacists yet, but white Anglo-Saxon males were concerned about being outnumbered by Catholics. And so, and because of that, another thing is that they realized that it was their wives who were seeking abortions, and mostly their wives. And of course, the Catholics don't, because that's not what they believe, right? Life begins at conception. So, in order to maintain the dominant part of the population, keep it white and English, but not Catholic and Italian and so on, Irish. They actually put more stringent. They made abortion illegal and then made it harder for women to get. They also lost out with the civil rights movement, and they needed another cause to rally support around, and it became abortion. And so people may not believe this now, but in the 70s, the Southern Baptist Convention actually had a resolution that supported abortion as a means of birth control, which now you think about, they've completely flipped this narrative or that stance, and now they support. They are anti-abortion. So really, what this ties to is that white supremacy now, and also now we've also got white supremacist groups involved in anti-abortion in the anti-abortion movement. So it does completely tie in with our self-determination and our seeking some a good political status and how we're going to run ourselves once we get that. But I also want to call attention to the fact that traditionally our our community, our culture is matriarchal. We have a powerful matriarchal heritage. And so it doesn't really make any sense to go out to condone legislation that has its background in a male patriarchy. So, I mean, if people really want to think about our culture, it really is rooted in strong women and women who can make decisions about whether they wanted to have a baby or not, and so on. The other thing I would like to close off on is the religious aspect. When people say life begins at conception, or when the heartbeat, there's a heartbeat, there's life, that is a religious interpretation, and not everybody follows those religious teachings. And so we're founded on a separation of church and state, religion and state, and for good reason. And that's because we don't want any religion to overpower another. And so I'm just hoping that people understand that they do have control. They can make a decision, but it's also up to who they vote into office. And I'm so glad that Nick raised the names of the people who sponsored the Bill 291, because I'm hoping that we've raised awareness so that people are stimulated to go to the polls and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you. And Carla, would you like to please share your final thoughts with us?
Sure. I think, at the issue throughout the discussion of 291 and listening to a lot of the comments today and the discussion about abortion, I think, before we even to get into this discussion of abortion, we need to first and foremost correct all our social injustices now. We have a huge high rate of sexual assault on Guam. And I know because I help those patients, right? And I think, we need to correct that. We need to help our foster care system. We need to increase our access to the health care and to birth control. I, as a healthcare provider, find it difficult to obtain birth control. And what more so are young females out there, or are young, people who can bear children. It pains me when people pull me to the side and say, I don't know where to go. I don't know how to get in. I don't have a provider. I'm in trouble. I need help. It pains me to see the struggles. I can't afford my medications. I can't afford birth control. I can't afford a baby. I have to choose between working and caring for my child. Let's fix those issues first. Let's build a strong society, and then we can go down the issue of abortion. But we should never force a woman or a childbearing person to have to choose between putting food on their table and providing for a baby, giving up their child, having to enter foster care system. Yes, there are plenty of people who say they want to adopt a child. Great, we have 600 plus in foster care. Go find those people. Go adopt those children. Go provide them the love. There should not be a single person in that emergency foster care home. There should not be a single person who is not placed, if those are truly the sentiments. And in closing, why is my religious view? I'm a devout Catholic. My husband is a devout Baptist. Why is my religious views superior to everybody else's? Why, if someone doesn't share the same views as me, who am I as a good Catholic to judge that person? God says, don't judge others, right? Isn't that in the Bible? Isn't that what we're taught? So why am I judging other people's decisions? Let that be between their God and them. Thank you very much for having me on here. I truly appreciated it. And I'm a little outside my comfort zone with the coalition issues, but I really appreciated having this floor.
Thank you, Carla. We appreciate you joining us. And for final last thoughts, and then we'll go answer some questions from our viewers. Miss Debby, can you give us your final thoughts?
Well, everybody, I just echo what everybody has talked about. So many good things. So I guess the only thing I would say is that, you know, we have subscribed to the Sustainable Development Goals, and part of that is reproductive rights and rights of women. And part of that is also the Earth Charter. The Earth Charter supports, that's the values underlining and enabling us to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And those are also based on reproductive rights, you know, and rights of women, having women more included in conversations in the government and politics and in the community, just like it used to be, like Joni was saying, you know, in a matriarchal society, and somehow that got shifted, right? So, you know, the United Nations and the leaders around the world, they recognize that in order to have a better, more just, peaceful world, we need to get the women more involved and for their rights to be protected. And so I will end with that.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I believe, can everyone stay, or does Carla, do you have to leave?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your opinions with us and your views, and being very, very vulnerable. Thank you for joining us. Adios. I believe the rest of you are going to stay for some Q&A. So we'll go to some questions now from our viewers. And the first one is, let's see. Question: older people vote more consistently than younger people, which is our politics are often more conservative than the actual community. How can we get more younger people voting to counter this? I'm going to ask Paige. You're the youngest one here.
Yes. So I would say more, just more, I would say flyer, or, you know, social media plays a big role, especially in my generation and the generation before me's lives nowadays. We can't, you know, we're in the timeline of technology, and this is the fastest way and the best way to really get teens, get high schoolers and adults my age, in my age range from 21 to 22, to get out there and vote. And I know a lot of females my age are already on this movement. They're voting, but just to get more would be promoting it more in school, promoting it more when you're just walking around. It could be simply walking around, talking to a stranger. That's the best way to also do it. You know, did you hear about what is going on? You know, how do you feel about this? This is what's going to happen if this could potentially happen if you help contribute to rejecting this bill this movement that they are trying to pass. So I would say social media, and I'm, you know, flyers are cool still, I think, but mainly social media. You can post flyers, videos, have interviews with how younger people feel about this or the different perspectives, and collect it all as one. But yes.
Thank you so much. There's another question from our audience. I hear Bob Klitsky say that the terrible abortion law from the 1990s should now be law, with Roe being overturned. Is this true? Anyone want to address this question?
Yeah, sure. I think I can. Well, the Attorney General already stated in a letter or memo that law cannot go into effect. It was rendered moot by the overturn of or the uphold of Roe v. Wade being upheld in the 90s. What Klitsky is talking about is one of the most restrictive abortion laws at the time in the country. And I think Guam also made the New York Times because of it, or something like that, like major news because of that restrictive law. And if I remember correctly, many or most of the legislators signed off on it, approved it. But it did not take effect because Roe v. Wade was overturned, was upheld, sorry. And because of that, there has to be some other legal way to get for that law to go into effect. It has to kind of maybe, I'm not really sure what that legal method would be, but it's not going to be triggered. It wouldn't be triggered by the overturn of Roe v. Wade.
Thank you, Joni. Another question from our audience here. How can those who shout the loudest about restricting the rights of women to abortion be so quiet when it comes to the everyday sexual violence against women and children on this island? Does anyone want to come in and comment on this? Respond to this?
Can you repeat the question, Lasia?
It was, how can those who shout the loudest about restricting the rights of women to abortion be so quiet when it comes to the everyday sexual violence against women and children on this island? I think they were, referring to the fact that this abortion issue is just overwhelmed and taken so much attention compared to some of the other issues that are just as important and immediate.
I definitely think, and please join in, I don't have a lot to say on this, but with all the revelation of all the sexual abuse scandals in the church over generations and the silence of the members of the person's family, there's just stigma around sexual violence, and there's so much, it's such a delicate situation, that even people who experience the violence have a hard time expressing. And thank you again to you, Auntie Deb, Auntie Debbie, for being vulnerable, as Nick said, and sharing your personal story of abuse and being taken advantage of. So I mean, I can't speak for everybody, especially those who are pro-life and advocating for restrictions of healthcare on other people based on their religious views. But it is, as Carla was saying, it's a major issue that no one is really championing, especially in light of the threats on reproductive rights. This is not a good answer to this response. It's not adequate at all, but it really is an unfortunate situation that we have here on Guam, where we have more than a rape. We have like 2 rapes a week, and that's just for what's reported. So there's so much more that needs to be done to really combat the violence in our community, the sexual violence in our community.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, maybe
Nick.
if I can just, oh, sorry, Nick, you want to go?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. You
Go.
can go ahead and go.
Oh, okay. Older ones trump. No, I'm just kidding. But, the thing that comes to my mind, it goes back again to the whole thing that I was talking about before, is that within the church, it was that the males had the power. They had the control. And so people can talk about, it's righteous of them to be anti-abortion, which again brings up the thing that if this is about the killing of people, then we should be just as vocal about being anti-war, and anti-other things, drugs and alcohol that are also killing people, a lot. But I think that sexual abuse had become such a normalized thing because of the silence and not being given the place that it was in conversations. When I came out and I was talking about things like this, and I remember, people didn't want to hear me talk about it, and as a woman, a survivor, I needed to talk about it. And so you had to go into these groups, right? So people don't like to talk about, sexual abuse, but it's very common. We know that 3 out of 4 girls are usually sexually abused, and 1 out of 6 boys. I know it's 4 out of 6 altogether in our communities that are sexually abused. And it's more often with males than with females, but it's still there. And the impact of it, it's generational. I will say it's generational. You know, it can lead to things like addiction and other kind of issues, suicide, depression, you know, mental health issues. And then that just cycles down through the family. So, but it's the thing that people least want to talk about. They're very uncomfortable talking about it. If you want to clear a room, start talking about sexual abuse and people will leave. You know, so it's something that people don't want to talk about, and it's something that happens so much. And we can probably guarantee that most people, you know, within these conversations, that either they or somebody that they know has been sexually abused. But it's something that's kept still down. If they're talking more about it, it is coming more, like especially with the men that we're talking about, the priest and the situation here on Guam. You know, it took them a long time, but you know, they are finding their voice and they are coming forward with it. So we do hear more about it, but if 70% of perpetrators, male perpetrators, were sexually abused themselves as young boys, you know, it's a cycle. And so something's got to stop that cycle. And I will stop there and let Nate go on from there.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, you know, just like, I just wanted to touch on something Moñeka said, which is how underreported these assaults are. And it's truly because, you know, even the mode for restorative justice for the survivors, it doesn't truly, we don't really have the appropriate framework. The justice system fails survivors as well. And so it's a lot worse than we even know. And that's really horrible. And I mean, it's devastating. It's devastating. And you're right. It's a violence that just keeps being passed through the generations. You know, and these things of these issues of sexual violence, they're definitely related to our history of colonial violence. You know, it's rooted in that history of colonial violence of the war that happened here. You know, that's a war is a horrible violence that you can't unsee, and it impacts all generations here. The war that took place here, the violence that took place here, but also, you know, the violence from the land takings, you know, the forced removal of our people from those lands, poverty, which is a huge problem here. We are a poor community. And, you know, just like I said earlier, the relentless destruction and desecration of our lands and waters, these things are really connected. And anytime there's a military exercise, you know, here in the islands here, but also if you look across any other place in the Pacific and Hawaii, when there's RIMPAC, you know, or even in Korea, Okinawa, and Japan, there is an increase of gendered violence. There is an increase of rape and sexual assault. And these things are so connected. And so let's not forget that. And so I think this is such a poignant question, because, you know, one of the things that I find really hurtful is when folks bring children to the pro-life protests. And I'm not here to critique people's choices with their children or, you know, what their position is. What I'm going to talk about, though, is that it's such a jarring image, considering, as what was mentioned earlier, that the church harbored so many of the people, or people who cause so much harm in our community, harm that some people may never see justice for or may never heal from, some that impacts families. And so I just wanted to say that comment.
Thank you, Moñeka. And thank you, ladies, for bringing up Bill 291-36 and the authors of the bill. And, you know, it is such a polarizing issue on our island, and people do have the opportunity to go out there and voice their opinion with the upcoming election. And I just want to remind everyone that they still have time to register until the 19th to vote. I'm sorry, until the 17th to vote. So you can please go and register. You have until the 19th to vote early, and you can go to the Westin and vote early. I believe it's from 8 to 6 p.m. to vote early. And our election, the primary is on the 27th, just a few weeks away, so people can vote and you know, effect cause on this issue. So I just wanted to remind everyone out there, please exercise your vote. And if you feel strongly about these issues, and these are the things that are directing our island. Let's see, we have a couple of more comments and questions here. Here's a comment. According to Torres, the key to colonization of the Chamorros was the silencing of the Chamorro women. How can we see the suppression continuing in the heartbeat bill and attacking abortion rights? Carla, you stated your position with conviction and passion. Let's see, what else? Another comment. So many nuances to this discussion: medical, legal, religious, cultural, generational. Definitely hope to hear more from many perspectives on this issue. I think we addressed that question. Let's see. I haven't been to church in a while, so I don't know how much they tried to push the agenda of Bill 291. Does anyone have any insight on that?
I think it was a few weeks ago from the pulpit. Our Archbishop released a letter that also said if you support pro-life, that you're morally corrupt, and that you shouldn't, or not pro-life, pro-choice. If you're pro-choice and abortion is wholly against the Catholic religion, and if you're even just a supporter of a woman's ability to, or any pregnant person's ability to make that choice to terminate their pregnancy, that you shouldn't even go up to get communion. So that was a message that was issued across the island on behalf of the Archbishop I think at the beginning of the month. And then I know that they are telling school-age children to go to pro-choice or pro-life rallies. And as we saw at the Liberation Parade too, that was a big church contingent that was a part of the anti-abortion, part of their little contingent on the march. So it's not just the Catholic Church, but other religious groups are very much pushing this on the agenda. But
I'm wondering, does the church still hold a position here on Guam in terms of that women are not supposed to use any kind of birth control?
Yes.
So they can't use
Yes.
birth control and they can't have an abortion.
The only accepted method for birth control for the Catholic Church is the rhythm method, which is questionable as to its efficacy. But that is what you are told if you go to pre-Cana classes to use. So it is something that is not, I'm going to just say it, it's not practical. And Paige said it herself. She said, teenagers are going to have sexual intercourse no matter what. And I think that we have to face the reality of teen pregnancy on this island, child pregnancy, not just, I mean, even younger than teen pregnancy, because girls are developing much earlier. And then there's always the danger of getting pregnant because you're raped. But this idea of withholding or discouraging contraception in the face of our high numbers of teen pregnancies and so on, it just it's just not practical. Sorry?
I want to read this comment here. I want to read one comment here from one of our viewers. Teach the woman to love themselves and to abstain themselves for pleasure. When you abort a child, it is considered murder in the eyes of God, according to the word of God. So yes, you have a choice, but God said to choose life. So
and again,
saying, abstain from giving yourself to pleasure.
I would like to add to that comment actually, because with going with love and
Taylor.
pleasure, when a woman loves herself, and example, the baby is made with love, especially with the intimate partner, then of course she would not abort it. She's choosing wisely because that her creation was determined with love. But if it was not, if she was not even choosing pleasure in the event of it happening, then the right choice for her would be to abort the baby, because she's not going to love what if she's not going to give the love she has within herself to that child. That child is going to go through life just comes with life and death. That's just a part of our cycle and how we live. So the baby, the future child, is going to go through a lot of emotional shifts, a lot of downfalls, because she's going to have all these questions. They're going to be lost. And then they're going to find out that the mom was filled with love, but it was not the love that she wanted. And that's all I would like to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. So we have time for one more question from our viewers. According to Torres, the key to the colonization of the Chamorros was the silencing of the Chamorro women. How can we see the suppression continuing in the heartbeat bill and attacking abortion rights?
Well, obviously, Torres, I'd like to. Obviously, Torres recognized that the matriarchal power of the Chamorro women, that he needed to stop that because they were so influential, and he was and of course he was shocked by the sex house, right, of women actually teaching young men how to have sex. But you know, the Chamorros, our ancestors, they had it down. They were very, okay. So Torres clearly knew where the power structure, he understood the power structure, and that's why women needed to be silenced. So with Bill 291, this again, well, okay, so it's multifaceted in its effect on the community. For one thing, it actually directly affects the providers. So if anybody finds out that a medical provider knowingly gave a woman an abortion, or aided and abetted an abortion, that they could sue that person, right? So that is it's basically a parroting of the Texas heartbeat law, the Texas law. And what this does, so it doesn't go after the pregnant woman or pregnant person, but what it's going to do, the effect is horrible, because it's going to erode our healthcare system, such as it is already. It's just, we don't have adequate healthcare for women anyway, but it's going to further erode that healthcare. We can't even offer abortions right now because there is no abortion provider on island. But people have to understand that problems occur during a pregnancy, and that if it is necessary to save the life of the mother, then there is, an abortion has to be done. But just by putting that down on the record, that opens up the physician to questioning. It's like the Spanish Inquisition all over again. But now this causes providers to be wary. It'll make them hesitate about how to apply care to the person, and because they're thinking about, what if I get sued? And so while they're waiting and thinking about this, it places the person, the pregnant person, into a high-risk situation, and it could be a life-threatening situation as well. So,
and I think that Carla brought up the earlier, that it's not just abortions, it's anyone who decides to have a private surgery, an elective surgery. So it could be a gender reaffirming surgery, or gender affirming healthcare. So yeah, it opens the floodgates.
It'll open the floodgates to board legislation that could affect that, yes.
Yeah. But on that, it seems that we've come to the end of our panel discussion. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Joni. Thank you, Monaeka. Thank you, Nick, Debby, Josephine, Taylor, Carla. Thank you, Mike, and the Fanohge Coalition. Any last words, Josephine? Nope. It's been my pleasure. It's been my pleasure moderating all these amazing women. Thank you so much. It's been enlightening. Thank you to all our viewers. I think we had a huge crowd.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Lasia for moderating, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming. If you're interested in finding out more about the coalition, please like our Facebook. You can always reach out to the Fanohge Coalition's email, fanohgecoalition@gmail.com. If you have more questions or like to get involved, please also check out the list of all our member organizations, including the folks who represent the organizations here today. So just want to say thank you, everybody. Please have a great and safe night.
Don't forget to vote.
Just Masi. Adios.
Yay.